Gonna type it. All right, great. Should we? I'm just going to admit one more person and get started. Okay, so hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. And I am excited to see some familiar faces, some repeat community members. We've got a few coming in as well. So what I would like to do to get us started is possibly just kind of get a sense of where everyone is dialing in from and really kind of get an idea of how global this community can actually reach to. So if I'm going to ask you guys to just kind of pick up your phones and give me a second and scan the QR code, please tell us where you are logging in from. All right, and I am going to start sharing the results. So if we've got anyone who hasn't had the chance to scan the code, feel free to look at the chat. My colleague Noor just put a link in there. All right, we've got some answers to share with us. I see Elsheen just joined in. We've got South Africa, Johannesburg, Canada, Nairobi. We've got some new countries this time as well. That's very interesting. Washington, KSA. Beautiful. Truly is a global entity then. Hi, Elsheen. How are you? Nice to see you again. All right. Just admitting one more person. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, guys, and everyone with us today. I really do. I'm very grateful for everyone joining us and joining this community. As some of you may have noticed in the video, what we really want to do is come together and make sure that we are here to learn and grow. And we at Stories love to see businesses grow. And we believe that that only happens when each one of us grows. So I think one thing that is very important for us to highlight is what we try to do with the community is to make sure that everyone is vetted before coming in and joining the community so that you all feel like this is a real and unfiltered safe space where we can come together and talk and feel free to express whether it's certain challenges, obstacles, whatever it may be. This is where it is. And so on a monthly basis, we run these roundtables. We've got amazing speakers with us today, as well as, sorry, let me just, yeah. So we've got some amazing speakers with us today. And over the past 2 rounds, we've had some speakers from various backgrounds, whether it's multinationals, scale-ups, startups as well, and really come together and share experiences. So one of the things that we're actually going to start doing moving forward is to spotlight one of our community members every month to be a speaker with us. That way, we're really expanding that reach. You're getting that access to over 15,000 professionals We've seen the countries that we have people attend from. So it's really an opportunity to gain experiences, whether these are ones that we can bring on board or just to learn and grow. So I would love for you to scan as well and join our community, so that you're updated of all the topics that we have coming up, our events, and just really come together and share. Now, one of the things that we do in the community is to really listen out to what people are saying, whether they're community members, our clients, and just kind of get a sense of what are some of the pain points, to make sure that all of the topics that we tackle moving forward are ones that are of global relevance. So what we've done was we heard people, and last time one of the things that was high up on the agenda was burnout and well-being, and hence this is what we're talking about today. We've got some amazing speakers today to join us and share their insights. And one of the things that we found also very interesting is that according to a recent survey by McKinsey, there's about, so they surveyed some corporate, and what makes this number quite interesting is that that actually translates into financial impact, which comes up to about $2 trillion, according to Gallup. And that is a cost that we can't just ignore. So I'm hoping that Dr. Ivan, Sundrie, and Scott can shed some more light on that, and really get us going to see what these amazing speakers have to share with us today. So to get us started, I will hand over to Lubna, and she will take over. Lubna is our founder and CEO. Some of you may be familiar, and for others, I will have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here in your presence today. So I'm Lubna. I wear multiple hats in my life. First and foremost, I'm a mom. That's the best title that I like to identify with. I'm also the founder of Stories. I'm a certified coach. I'm a board member in an NGO. And I'm also a member of Dr. Gabor Mate's Compassionate Inquiry community. We are on a mission to help companies grow, and we firmly believe that companies can only grow when you grow as individuals. So we've developed a coaching marketplace with access to more than 700 coaches in our network. And we offer individual and group coaching to organizations so that we can see you grow. And one of the things that we see in coaching is a lot of burnout. We see entrepreneurs like me burn out. I've personally burnt out at one point in my life, and I'm sure many of you around this room have as well. We see employees burn out, and we even see HR leaders burn out. And I started my career in HR, and if there's one thing, and I ran away from HR very quickly, but if there's one thing I wish I had when I was in HR is a community like this. So that's why we want to offer this complimentary to all HR leaders, so you can come and share your pain points and feel free to speak in an unfiltered way. We're very, very fortunate to have amazing speakers with us today. And I'm going to kick us off with starting with Dr. Ivan. As a former UN staff member, it's my privilege to have Dr. Ivan join us from the World Health Organization. Nadine, perhaps you can spotlight me and Dr. Ivan so everybody can see him. So Dr. Ivan is the Chief Lead Occupational and Workplace Health at the World Health Organization head office. He has 20 years of experience, so he's an expert in this space. He's a medical doctor and with a PhD in sociology, health, and environment. And he believes in creating healthy, safe, and resilient workplaces for all. Dr. Ivan, it's a privilege to have you with us. Welcome to our community.
Thank you very much, Lubna. My pleasure too.
So what we're going to do today for everyone is we're going to go through a series of questions that we've prepared with Dr. Ivan. And then if any of you have questions for Dr. Ivan, you can come on screen right after I finish. I'm not going to go through all my questions. I'll just do a few because I want to make sure that you all have a chance to ask Dr. Ivan any questions that you want to ask him. And we'll repeat the same process with all the other speakers as well, because this is a community for all of you. So we want to make sure that you have the chance to come on screen or to write in the chat any questions that you have. So I'm going to start with the first question. Dr. Ivan, your project portfolio includes healthy, safe, and resilient workplaces, scaling up coverage with occupational health services, and improving health of working people in general. You're also a doctor and an MPH in occupational health. How did you get into this space, and why does that matter to you?
Well, first, I have to tell you that maybe it would sound strange for other medical doctors to hear the word occupational health. And they usually ask me, what is that? So by the time I explain what it is, they are not interested anymore to follow. Because in English, it sounds horrible, occupational health, the health of an occupation, or, well, in any other language, there are normal words like health of workers or health at work or health related to work. So, but in English, it is different. But I always wanted to, I first wanted to become a surgeon because I wanted to make difference quickly and to see the results of my work, but for different reasons it didn't happen. But I got into the so-called occupational health, where you can also see differences, though they don't happen that quickly, but they do happen compared to other public health areas. For example, environmental health, climate change. It may take even hundreds of years to see differences, like we see the differences of clean water now, and the clean water as a source of disease was discovered 2 centuries ago. But in occupational health, differences happen quite quickly. So, and it is from our public health area that is closer to clinical medicine. So that's why I'm with you today to discuss burnout and what it means for physicians, and what it means also for those who burned out or who think that they have burned out.
Thank you for that. And you became a surgeon in a different way. So,
yes, yes.
The WHO defined burnout as an occupational phenomenon, I think a few years ago. Why is that significant?
Well, it is, first of all, it is not a new phenomenon. It was just several years ago, WHO issued the 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases, in which the new thing is that it provided a definition of what are the different diseases and entry points in this classification. So it, for the first time, it described the occupational burnout, what it is. But occupational burnout was also in the 10th revision of the International Classification of Diseases. So it is not new, but because now it is described, it attracted a lot of attention. And it is described not as a disease, not as a medical condition, but it is described in the chapter Factors Influencing Health Status or Contact with Health Services. So this is the reason for which health people contact a health service. So you have a general practitioner who sees a patient who says, "Doctor, I am so weak, I cannot work, I have no energy, I am exhausted, I don't like anymore my job, my colleagues are bad with me, I am not efficient." So, well, they wonder what to write. This is, again, such a condition. So it is a condition for which people seek medical service. But it is not a disease because it is not something that is strict in terms of diagnostic criteria. It can be anything. Burnout can be chronic fatigue, it can be depression or anxiety feelings, so it can be can be a lot of mental health conditions that are described as diseases, mental disorders can be in that package. But it is true that burnout it arises among people who are very committed to their job. So it is, and it is not always as a result of too much work, but it is sometimes a result of big ambitions and less awareness about what are the individual capacities to meet these ambitions. So this type of people, they easily develop this condition, this syndrome. But it's because of the COVID, it became extremely popular. And so it is like COVID and then burnout, and COVID and then burnout, and then Zoom fatigue, like Zoom fatigue. So it became extremely popular, but it's very, very difficult to define as a disease. And if it occurs, such conditions, if they occur, what I know from talking to colleagues, psychiatrists, they are very serious, and usually people do not even return to work. So it can be years of, more than a year of being absent from work, and usually people don't return to work. So that is the classical burnout. But there are often situations like chronic fatigue, and I had myself also during the COVID outbreak. I was deployed in COVID response. I also had the feeling and situation when I was absolutely not able to do anything. And of course, I saw a psychiatrist, and he prescribed a 1 month sick leave and said, Ivan, don't do anything. This is the treatment. 1 month sick leave. And after 1 month sick leave, of course, I wanted to go back to work, and I was fully recovered. So it was not a real burnout. The psychiatrist said, Ivan, if that was a burnout, you wouldn't be back at work.
I love that story, and I love the recommendation of don't do anything. Don't do anything. Wonderful.
Yeah.
How, we have a lot of HR leaders. Obviously, the whole audience are HR leaders with us today. And if we can think of actual practical steps of what they can do when their employees are facing burnout. One of the things that I've noticed when I work with corporations is well-being is a bit of a buzzword, and the only time they care about well-being is when they are making money or saving money, unless they are doing a tick-the-box exercise. So I'm curious, with your experience, and given the audience that we have with us today, what are the tips you would recommend to HR leaders they do when they have employees come to them with burnout?
Right. Well, burnout and other mental health effects like depression, anxiety, extreme fatigues, they are product of poor HR. They are product of inability to manage human resources in a good way. They are failure of management because they are caused by inadequate allocation of work tasks. Some people get too much, some people don't get. Inadequate also allocation of tasks regarding the individual capacities. The control over someone's work, for example, if I have to do things of which there is a big demand, but I have no control over my work. I have no control on how I do it, how I organize my work when I work. That is a recipe also for any kind of mental disorder. It can be burnout, can be depression, can be anxiety, can be other things. So that is rooted also in HR practices. For example, we talk about harassment, bullying. These are interpersonal relations. And poor interpersonal relations sometimes result of just poor job descriptions, duplication in job descriptions, or ambiguity in job descriptions, or poor coordination of people, or lack of resources, or competition for resources. And these are symptoms of the poor HR. Also, HR is very important to encourage managers to be able to recognize the risks for poor mental health at the workplace. What are if people are arguing, have quarrels about something, it means that there is something behind. There are managerial solutions to that. It's not just bringing people together and have the ombudsman take care of their situations, but there are managerial solutions behind that. Usually these are poor management or poor distribution of tasks or allocation of resources. It's not just personalities. So the human resource colleagues have a lot in this area. It might be also insecurity in contracts, precarious contracts, temporary contracts. I don't know whether my contract will be renewed next week. I don't know what to do with myself. These are worries. Promotions, unfairness, inequity, all these are rooted in HR. So HR has a lot also to offer in order to make sure that the human resources in companies that are here present, that are knowledge-based companies that rely primarily on human resources, they are well managed and they are regularly oiled. They are regularly examined to see if something can go wrong, that they are regularly coordinated and managed and taken care of so they can produce. Because if they cannot produce, if they are sick, if the humans get sick, then the loss is between, in the UK, the Institute of Employment managed to put an estimate that sickness leave, sickness absence costs between 2 and 16% of the salaries of the team or the enterprise, the company. So that is an enormous loss, and that's only the salaries. Imagine also the loss on the lack of productivity because tasks have to be redistributed or they have to be delayed, and then the relations with the clients. So this is enormous, and many actually sick leaves can be prevented.
Thank you for that. Dr. Ivan, you've kind of opened a line of fire at all the HR leaders who are present with us today, and you've gotten a lot of comments in the comments. But there's one that I'd love to maybe read out from Luz, who says, as discussed in previous session, HR is often not listened to or supported by leadership. So while you're saying that it's an HR issue, a lot of the HR leaders who are present with us today are actually saying, no, this is not an HR issue. This is a leadership issue because the leaders are not listening to us. So it's a bit of a vicious circle. So what do you recommend in that case if we were to be very practical, if they are not being listened to? What do you recommend?
Well, it is just speaking with the facts. Speaking with the facts, I mean, HR is HR. HR is not responsible for the management of the company. It is the CEO responsible for the management of the company, but speaking with the facts and presenting the facts that people are getting sick because of this and that, or this caused this and that to the company. I mean, then the shareholders will have the final say on that. You know, in the UN, there is now a dashboard about the UN corporate social responsibility, how to improve. And one is the performance of the management in terms of corporate social responsibility, in terms of protecting environmental human capital, in terms of protecting people. So if the management fails, then it is bad. So there are the shareholders are increasingly holding the management also responsible for the performance in terms of human resources. And now the International Labour Organization anonymously declared that all workers and all employees have the right to safe and healthy work environment. So violating that right means poor performance on human rights.
I am, thank you for that. I'm getting a lot of private comments and public comments, and I'm wondering if there is anyone who'd like to come on the screen and ask their question directly to Dr. Ivan. Would anyone like to put their hand up and maybe come and ask their question directly to Dr. Ivan, just so that there's a variety of us asking questions? Anybody who has put in comments in the publicly. Elçin joining us from Turkey. Go ahead. And Luz also. And then maybe we can transfer these two questions to the next speaker just to make sure that we have enough time. Go ahead, Elçin.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good evening to everyone and welcome, Mr. Ivanov. It was a really very fruitful and effective presentation. Thank you so much. My question is that HR people are dealing with burnout a lot lately. Do you have specific suggestions for us so that we can deal with all this ambiguity and also the burnout problem of the employees and the total organization as well? Thank you so much.
Well, the suggestion is always when people come back from a sick leave because of burnout, is to have a discussion with the manager and with the team how to accommodate, what kind of work accommodation is needed. And these are WHO recommendations also for managing mental health disorders at the workplace. How the work should be reorganized. We cannot make people sick and treat them and put them back in the same working conditions that made them sick. So that's not gonna work. Something has to change. And the situations would be totally different, but every case is individual, but have a discussion. This is a serious sign. I'm sure the doctor has given recommendations. If it is occupational burnout and people come back with a medical report that it is an occupational burnout and the doctor recommends work accommodation, make sure that there is work accommodation, because often there is nothing and people will go back on sick leave.
Thank you, Dr. Ivan. Luz.
Hello. Thanks, Doctor. I was a bit angry about some of your comments because as an HR, I feel very frustrated sometimes, but I hear you. It's important. And, you know, I've suffered burnout myself, so I'm very pushy when it comes to not having it. However, I work in startups, and there's a real situation where, you know, because of lack of funding, we have so many resources or people we can hire, and there's always periods of time where we all have to just go and do a lot of work, and it's so I wonder if you have any recommendations as like medical advice for these situations where we can't avoid really a lot of work for an extended period of time. You know, we can't do anything like hiring more people or giving more vacations because we need the people there because it's a startup. Are there any like small or more practical tips we can give our employees so that they feel refreshed and can keep going for a while?
Unfortunately, this problem requires management and financial solutions and not medical solutions. This is management and corporate financial problems. So there are many people, there are some people say, oh, yeah, well, we can train the workers how to be resilient and how to avoid stress. I was talking to one of the psychologists also, and I was asking about myself, to give examples with myself. I was asking, okay, what I can do in order to be more resilient and to stress and to all these things. And then she said, well, Ivan, imagine if every morning when you go to work, your neighbor comes out and slaps you on your face. And you want me to teach you how you can live with that? That's impossible. There are some techniques, there are some mindfulness, meditation that people can get better, but there are limits. There are limits. So definitely sometimes too much greedy and corporate greed is the source of the problem. So resolving that issue and being realistic in what can be accomplished is very important.
What an incredible discussion, heated discussion, corporate debate. I love that. So maybe we'll take one more question. I'm really sorry, but we do have to shift to the next speaker to make sure we end on time. And what I also recommend, because I see that this discussion is quite engaging, we're happy to stay on after the 1 hour. And if anybody has questions, we're more than happy to answer them. But I do want to make sure we stick to the 1 hour. Neha, if you can keep your question pretty brief, and Dr. Ivan, if I can ask you to also keep the answer brief, and then I'm going to have to shift to the next speaker, if that's okay. Go ahead, Neha.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Ivan. I'm really impressed with your findings. You have mentioned that it's a result of ambition. But how can HR handle the ambitious people? Because they have tendency to take up more responsibility. They will not come in front and say that I am overburdened. So how can we help them?
Well, I'm sure you cannot do everything. You cannot do everything. Most probably you have an occupational health service, and that service has also a staff counselor or a psychologist that they can advise. Most probably your occupational health service is running different campaigns and about awareness of people. So that this is where you can address the matter of don't be too greedy, be realistic on what you can do and how much you can change the world. And don't burn because of that.
Be realistic in how much you can change the world. Amazing. Dr. Ivan, it's been incredible. We could go on like this for the whole hour, but I shift to the next speaker if that's okay. And if I see all the comments that are in the chat, and I will make sure that we stay on after and answer any questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Ivan. It's been beautiful and enlightening to have you. Nadine, I'm going to hand over back to you.
Great. So thank you so much, Dr. Ivan. And I really do love that what you said at the end, where you have to be realistic. I've just been recently told not to try to be Superwoman. So what I would like to do is maybe share the screen once again. And I would, before we go on to the next, excuse me, yes. So before we go on to our next speaker, what I would really like to do is I saw in the comments people saying that we don't have a place in the table. People are not listening to us, which brings me to our March event, which is Lean Out and Build Your Own Table. It is a celebration for Women's Month. And the idea is we want to kind of shift the idea of always telling people to lean in and just kind of go with the flow. We want you all to kind of lean out, build your own table, find that seat. And if you can't find it, make it yourself. So please feel free to register. You can scan the code. Noor will also share a link in the chat. And if you're unable to join us in March, I am very excited to also announce that we've got our 2024 calendar out. And you can see a few of the topics here where we've set it out. And these are all based on us, again, listening to either clients, our members, to really understand what topics and what pain points you have. So what I would also like to ask is if we can just take a few minutes and scan the code and have you kind of vote on what you feel is a topic that resonates the most with you, so that we can also get a sense of whether we should be adding different topics. So please also feel free in the voting to mention as well any other topics that you find interesting that you would like us to tackle through our monthly roundtables. So I will just put this up for a few seconds and then I will share the results. Okay. So if I was to just move here. So we're seeing HR Tech, Data and AI. That's actually the one coming up in April. Great places to work, generational leadership, executive presence. We have a lot of people with us in the community. Please feel free to share with us a bit more to get an idea. All right. Okay. And then in terms of what else, if there are others, I don't see any responses right now, but feel free to share them in the chat. And again, I see great places, creating great places to work is picking up. So is generational leadership. That's perfect. If you feel, because I'm mindful of the time and I would really like to introduce our next speaker, feel free, please, to maybe in the comments share any other topics that you feel might be of interest so that we can make sure that we tackle those in the future. All right. So thank you very much. I am going to stop sharing now. Okay. Let me introduce our next speaker. So we've heard from Dr. Ivan from a policymaker's point of view and perspective. I am very excited to now announce a HR leader who has taken employee well-being and happiness as her purpose. So please join me in welcoming Sundrie Naidoo from joining us from South Africa. Let me just spotlight you. All right. So Sundrie is joining us from South Africa, and she is a huge advocate in the field of employee mental well-being. She's made a compelling initiative and a case for how happiness in the workplace has a positive impact on the bottom line. And I know that some of you did mention earlier that how can we balance that? So I am glad to welcome Sundrie, and she will provide us with some perspective. What I would like to do as well, if you give me a moment, is also spotlight. Okay, so Sundrie, thank you and welcome.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here among my peers.
We are so excited to have you here. So Sundrie, one of the things that I did notice when we were speaking before prepping for the event was the passion and the commitment that you really showed when you were speaking about employee well-being and the case of happiness and mental resilience. You've had quite a remarkable journey in terms of your career. You've worked in finance, banking, manufacturing, and now insurance with Discovery Vitality. How do you feel like, that journey has impacted that purpose and passion that you have towards employee well-being?
Thank you so much. So exactly as you said, it's been a passion of mine, and I've been fortunate enough to work across many industries. But I think what's really common, and amongst my peers as well, in a people role, is that nurturing a healthy workplace is the basis or the foundation for our people to thrive. So as Dr. Ivan mentioned, there's workplace stress, there's burnout, but it's really difficult to move beyond that. So if you've got a bad situation, how do we help you? How do we create an environment that, despite the challenges and obstacles you face, How do we equip you with tools and coping mechanisms to actually allow you to thrive? And I think, half the room will say, well, we shouldn't create this opportunity of where people find themselves in a position of burnout and stress. And I think the other half would agree with me is that's what a corporate environment is about. And how do we help our people through this process? And so when you talk about how did we create a case for happiness in Vitality, that was exactly the challenge that we faced. How do we equip our people with tools, but still help them to be engaged in the workplace, to still be productive, to still feel psychologically safe, to still be part of a team that actually delivers, but there are people around you who actually care. You can actually focus on little things that could make an impact on your life. So this is how the program called Thrive started for Vitality.
Okay, and Sundrie, so one of the things that you did mention was about Thrive, is that it's also a matter of everyone being involved. So how do you think coaching can play a role in making sure that we're not only the ones driving it, but everyone, including your leaders, are really taking on these initiatives?
Sure. So, I wrote this in a LinkedIn article a couple of months ago. I think it was an interview for the CHRO magazine, but that managers have just as much impact on their employees' mental health as their spouses, believe it or not. So 69% impact, the same as their spouses. A doctor, just to put this in perspective, has a 51% impact, and a therapist 41%. So imagine working in a corporate environment with a line manager that has a 69% impact on your mental well-being. So in terms of the question you asked me about how do managers or the support that you get from the leadership, when we started the program, a non-negotiable was that the manager or the line manager had to drive this program. And we had the support of our executive team. So executive sponsorship bought into the initiative, and the line manager could not delegate the responsibility or accountability to someone else or a more junior staff member, etc. They had a team that they needed to personally coach. So whilst we trained the line managers on how to facilitate and coach the team, they could not abdicate this responsibility. And I think with a manager being involved in the coaching for the happiness of their team and, the general mood of the team and how the team is feeling, it creates a more supportive culture. And I think often our employees don't see our line managers as being vulnerable. They see the manager as this perfect person who's leading, delivering, measuring output, measuring productivity, etc. But when the manager comes to a coaching session and says, I know it's been a really tough week for us. We've had a really hard week of deliverables. We've almost missed a deadline, but we've managed to recover. Everyone has come to the table, and we've delivered an amazing product or service, etc. But I could not have done this without you. And right now I'm feeling like I'm about to burn out and I can't wait for the weekend to de-stress, etc. It makes the team feel like this is a safe environment. I can talk about this. I can say to my manager, I tried really hard today to deliver a great piece of work, but it felt like some other team just took it apart. And then people actually want to speak and contribute of what it feels to be in the team and the pressure that they feel on themselves. So the interactions were also at least 3 weeks apart. and you couldn't change teams. So once you were part of a team, this is the team that you felt rapport with and support, etc. But you had like 3 weeks to think about what went well. There were exercises in between. There were moments of gratitude of, wow, I'm really grateful today of what happened, as opposed to it's just all negativity. So we had to create a mindset where people had to focus on more positivity than everything that went wrong, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, perfect. I mean, I do believe that because internally we also call them our glimmers. So every day we start our day focusing on the positives. So that's beautiful. If I was to just ask you what do you feel, what would be your response to what Dr. Ivan commented about the role of HR when it comes to driving this well-being or being the cause of burnout because of mismanagement? And Sundrie, if I can ask, just to make it a bit short in terms of the answer so that we can ask you about the actionable tips as well.
Sure. So I don't think that we can do this ourselves. As I mentioned earlier, we do need executive support. We need line managers, buyouts, etc. But organizations want to see numbers, and they want to see the rands or the dollars or the euros in terms of what mental well-being or employee well-being, the impact on the bottom line. I mean, they want to see that about finances as well. But I think it's important that we go to them with these numbers. I mean, we have the data. We have all the statistics, and we actually show them the impact that this is having on the organization, and that together we can actually tackle it. But it's not an issue to go to the bottom of the rung or something that gets scrapped because there are budget constraints, etc. In fact, I would make it a KPI of every single senior leader in a corporate, in terms of what is the impact of the well-being on their team and what are they doing to actually manage this.
I love that. I love incorporating that within the KPIs. I think that's actually very interesting to hear. What would you say for other HR leaders here would be 3 pieces of maybe some actionable advice? So maybe one of them was incorporating it within the KPIs, but how can other HR leaders implement a holistic wellness and maybe even a happiness program or strategy as smoothly as possible with getting buy-in from management?
Sure. So I think that you have to do your own employee self-assessment. You can't believe that you're HR and you have all of the answers, you know, that you've researched or read in a textbook or used a case study. So each of your organization's needs are unique. So, you know, surveys, focus groups, one-on-one discussions, pull up all of the data that you have of employee who have sought assistance through employee assistance programs. What are the kind of issues that employees face and the help that they ask for? And then create an holistic well-being program that's well-rounded, that takes care of physical health, mental health, work-life balance, financial stress, stress management, encourage more active behavior, etc., in the workplace. So it isn't just targeting one issue. And then I think what's really important is the culture. You really have to have a basis of a culture that fosters support, open communication. As I said, you know, leaders being vulnerable, psychological support, no judgment. You can't have a program where employees feel that they can't trust you or speak openly. Then it's just a program on a piece of paper. And then just listen to employees all of the time and adjust your strategies and initiatives accordingly.
I love that. I think one of the things I really do like about what you said was making the manager feel that vulnerability so that he and his team can connect and communicate openly. And that's one of the things that I think community also brings together. So Sundrie, what I would like to say is, first of all, thank you very much. I love that you've provided pure examples. What we can do is maybe open the floor for maybe 2 questions before we move on to the rest of our agenda. And we already have someone raising up their hand, Ashok. Let me just, yes. All right.
Hi,
If I
good
if I
evening.
can ask you please to just make your answer crisp and your questions as well, please.
Okay, I'll keep this very quick. It's more a comment rather than a question. I think there are 3 excellent points that Sundrie made that I wanted to touch upon. The first one is about the role of the manager. Gallup research says that only 1 in 7 people in the workplace is actually fit to be a manager. Now, this is important because it means that from an HR practice standpoint, we need to pay a lot of attention to who are the people that we are actually giving the role of being a manager to. Often in well-being programs, we don't think about that, but it's a very important consideration. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is, I think for a successful well-being program, each individual also has to be accountable to his or her own well-being. The way we tackled it in our organization is that we got each person to take a survey and write down their own focus areas for well-being. This is in addition to the stuff that was being done at the organization level and at the level of the individual team. And the third point is, as Sundrie very rightly said, your program needs to be a holistic program. The way we looked at it, we looked at in addition to physical well-being, we looked at mental, at community, at financial literacy, etc., etc., etc. All of these together, I think, give you a far greater chance of being successful. And want to thank Sundrie. I think her sharing was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for that. If I can just say one last point, Ashok, is that the manager's role is critical. If he or she has a 69% impact on your mental well-being, and you have to work with this person 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I mean, honestly, they are totally responsible for your mental well-being in the workplace.
Everything. I mean, just another stat for you is 70% of employee engagement is attributable to the manager. So every part of the workplace, I mean, the role of the manager is absolutely critical.
Thank you so much. That is a lot of interesting statistics. I think the numbers do kind of cement what we're saying and the importance of this topic. We would like to thank you, Sundrie, and we'll put some questions on for later. I will hand over to Lubna, who will take us through to our next segment. Thank you so much, Sundrie, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sundrie, and I add my voice to Nadine's very insightful conversation. And for those of you who had questions, we'll also make sure to stay behind at the end and answer more questions. So we're now going to shift to the third speaker. Maybe, Nadine, if you could share the diamond framework that we have, just so I can comment on what Sundrie mentioned. You mentioned at the end of the conversation, Sundrie, health, well-being, emotional, spiritual. That's how a lot of people usually measure well-being. But we actually believe from our conversations at Stories that managers only care about what's in it for them, like leaders and CEOs only care about well-being when you speak about how this is going to grow my top line or save money for the company. So what we've done is we've done an assessment for companies that we're more than happy to speak to you about, that focuses on how do you make money out of well-being and how do you save money? How do you save on legal costs, on recruitment, on turnover, on health and absenteeism, so that it is not costing your business the amount of money that it is. And with that, I'm going to shift over, just because we're running out of time, to our third speaker, a friend of mine. Very excited to welcome Scott. And Mariam, my colleague, will be interviewing Scott. If we can spotlight them on the screen, Nadine.
Yes.
Scott, just give us a second to spotlight Mariam, who will take us through the last segment. Go ahead, Mariam.
Welcome our third and final speaker for today, Scott Armstrong. You're joining us from Dubai, from the UAE.
I am.
Scott Armstrong is the founder of Mentl. It's a platform that shares access to content and resources in order to put mental health in the hands of everybody. he is a strong advocate of making all health mental health. I love that. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
I think before we really talk about the topic of corporate wellness and burnout, I just want to touch on the fact that a lot of people struggle with their mental health and they do so in secret because of all the stigma around it. And that really adds to the challenge of mental health. And you've really talked about your own personal experiences with that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, wow. I guess I went through a bit of a perfect storm 5 years ago or so. I guess what really truly woke me up to the impact of this can have was I lost my father to mental health. I didn't even know I'd lost him to mental health at the time. He was struggling from depression and couldn't even tell me. And he was one of the strongest guys I know, typical 1970s, strong British individual, successful CEO, ran his own company, global company, but couldn't talk to me about his mental health. And when he had a breakdown, we lost him in basically about 3 months. So, and I kind of had this memory of looking down at him in the open casket and going, we never talked, I was talking to him, but I was talking to myself. I knew he was gone. It was like, we've never had this conversation. So it was sort of like, I kind of vowed there and then to have more conversations about it. And the first person I started talking to about it was myself, and beginning to realize what was happening within me. The lots of stuff that was, trauma that was buried from the past started surfacing itself. I kind of went through a few job roles where I changed job roles. I'd done the same job for like 30 years. So that ripped up my self-image, and it was a very painful but very useful lesson to learn that I'm not what I do. I am me, and the job is something else. So that was something that I went through. And also I ended up in a couple of extremely toxic workplaces and really found how, and I consider myself, like my father, to be resilient. I mean, in journalism, which is quite a hard-bitten profession, for more than 3 decades, I've been an editor-in-chief. I've led newspapers, I've led teams, I've dealt with pressure, I've dealt with deadlines. But yeah, ended up in toxic workplaces where, and this would probably resonate with quite a few people, when the WhatsApp went off, it was a physical reaction. My entire body would tighten. And I got pretty close to falling over. And it's kind of like only my wife, who's a very strong Lithuanian woman, were just like, no, this can't go on. And we had to sit down and have conversations about whether I stayed in that role. Because often in this part of the world where we are as well, our continued existence in a place like Dubai is linked to our job visa, which used to give employers out here a lot of leverage. So if you didn't want your daughter to lose her school place, if you didn't want to go back to the UK, which if you're in this part of the world, you really don't want to go back to the UK, because the UAE, the GCC is fantastic. It's a brilliant place. So that's created over the years kind of like a hierarchy of fear in a lot of companies, which the government here is doing an awful lot to dismantle, but the private sector is lagging. I think the government's leading the way, but the private sector's got a long way to go to kind of wean itself off that hierarchy of fear, because it used to be an easy lever to pull, which is not so easy anymore.
Thank you for sharing that with us, with our community. I love the part where you said, I am more than what I do. I am me. I think that's incredible. And that's really important for everyone here to hear.
Yeah, it only took me 50 years to realize.
Yeah. And I think it really takes a lot for someone to turn their trauma into purpose and to really use that, which I think you've done with Mentl. As some of you hopefully already know, Stories won the award for most innovative mental health tech last year from Mentl. So tell us more about, the purpose surrounding that, why you created Mentl, why is it so important for us to be awarding startups in the realm of mental health?
Okay, well, the awards were just a kind of natural progression of the mission, because often, and when we have the conversation about mental health in workplaces, there is often, there's a lot of negative conversations that are had. There's a lot of, whether it be boss bashing, whether it be highlighting weak policies. But what I really wanted to do was take the good practices that were happening in disparate industries, whether it be engineering, whether it be construction, whether it be technology, whether it be startups, and try and extract that really good practice and put it out into the world, so we could kind of set a benchmark, so we could set a bar, and maybe not to say that that's what excellent is this year, but just to say that's what good is this year. Let's try and learn from each other's different industries. And we saw some fantastic examples from, from technology, such as yourself, to things that were happening in engineering, which were really, really educational, going, oh, well, we would never have thought about that. So it was kind of surface this stuff so we can set a benchmark. To anybody that is a well-being champion in companies, particularly big companies, sometimes doesn't have it easy. So we did, we did want to reward their work and make them feel that, actually they are being seen, heard, and valued. And I think the other thing we wanted to do, because we tried to make it a very glamorous event, which was, I'm sick and tired of mental health and well-being being one of these things that's shoved in the corner. The whole mission of Mentl is to try and tackle the stigma of mental health. So we wanted it to be as glamorous and as noisy as a fashion event, and also to try and show other companies that well-being and mental health is something that should be reached for. It's something that should be strived for. So we created the awards, completely independent panel of judges. I had, no impact on who won the awards. We had Paralympians, we had CEOs, we had chief medical officers from government mental health institutions. So it was a cross section of academics, private sector leaders, and clinicians who decided on the winners. So that was it. Why is it important to reward startups? Why is it important to recognize startups? Well, I guess I'm a startup myself, and to anybody who's a startup or a founder in this room today, it's hard work. I mean, it really is hard work. We see 9 out of 10 startups fail. And I think Lubna and I have spoken on a previous podcast, like how many entrepreneurs give up just before something really good happens, because it's hard. The highs can be really, really high, but the lows can be really, really low. So it was to, again, have an independent jury of founders, peers, to turn around and going, do you know what? You are doing something really good. Keep going.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we're celebrating these achievements and inspiring other startups as well to, like you said, reach that benchmark. Just touching on what our speakers have said about, reaching the point of burnout and how it's really hard to recover from, and how what Dr. Ivan was talking about, it really does fall on HR leaders to kind of put these initiatives in place. And like everybody in the comments was making sure we knew that can be very difficult.
No, I mean, that's difficult wisdom to receive, isn't it?
And how do we get management and leaders to take it seriously so that they're thinking of it as an investment and empowering the HR leaders to be able to do their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, it's about establishing the business case more than anything else. I mean, I would love to reach CEOs' hearts and convince them that emotionally it's the right thing to do. But as Lubna says, you have to make the economic case. I guess, I mean, look, we've got so much studies out there. We've got plenty of studies here in the UAE that show, like, last year, businesses in the UAE lost $10.3 billion through disengaged employees. 10.3, that's $500 million an hour. And we have actually created this clock that ticks up in real time, in seconds, as to how much money businesses here in the UAE are losing. In Saudi Arabia, across the border on the same metrics, it was like $25 billion. So money's going up in smoke. So there's that's the risk. And then there's the reward. And if you can start calculating it, I think my favorite figure is 327%, because that's the figure that the Human Resource Management Society, I think it was called, they did a study of studies. So there's so many studies out there that talk about the ROI of well-being. They took 100 and then took the average between the results of 100 different studies. They came back with 327%. You turn around to your C-suite and say, what projects are you doing that over a 2 to 3 year lifespan, because that's generally when we're going to see well-being initiatives have an impact if they're properly delivered, are going to give you 327%. Like last year, crypto, which actually had a Bitcoin, which had a reasonable year last year after a couple of other bad years, only came in with about 156% return on investment. So, you know, well-being is a better investment than cryptocurrency.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. What would you say for, for our community, for the HR leaders with us today, what would you say your 3 actionable steps for them to implement initiatives as smoothly as possible and to really fuse it into their culture or strategy to really boost emotional well-being past
I
just
mean,
jargon?
smoothly is probably not the word I would choose. I mean, the first step I would make, which is challenge this idea that somehow this is a HR problem, because it's not. Kind of to go back to Sundrie, what some of the things Sundrie was saying. This is a cultural issue inside the company. It has to be led from the top, the middle, and the bottom. You know, the culture of the company is set by the CEO, but equally the security guard that works at the door in the morning. And if your culture inside your company is not right, it doesn't matter what you do. It's all you're ever going to do is basically well-being washing. It's not going to work. And to talk about individual practices such as we're going to give our employees mindfulness training, or if we're going to give our employees yoga or time management training to make them more efficient. There's a big piece of research recently by Oxford University basically just said this, you're putting the blame on the employee. You're not looking at the workload, as Dr. Ivan was saying earlier. So I do think it's universally unfair that nobody made HR mental health specialist overnight. And yes, we've had a mental health crisis, probably exacerbated by the pandemic. So challenging this concept that this is a HR issue to fix to start with, I think that's the first step. It is a company culture. Without that foundation, you're not going to get anywhere. And then secondly, being able to actually hold a mirror up to yourselves and your company and look at the culture. I think there are too many HR departments who are very tempted to look at the results of engagement surveys to try and then present to the CEO and the C-suite a favorable picture. But if you're not honest, if you can't be self-reflective, then you're never going to diagnose the problem. And it might be that if you're incredibly, scrutinize your work really, really closely, maybe you are amazing. But it's having that honesty, that ability to self-reflect. And also, I mean, it's interesting because, and I hope this won't irk people in this community, but I was speaking to an organization, Emirates Global Aluminium. They have foundries, it's molten metal. The well-being of the mental health of their workers is incredibly important, because if it's not sharp, they can die. So they shifted mental health and well-being away from HR, not that HR was doing it badly, but to health and safety. And that was really interesting, because that had a dynamic of going, you see, like health and safety spend isn't seen as a burden on the business. It's seen as a necessary thing that mitigates and looks after the safety, to go back to that ILO definition of having a safe workplace. So it really changed the role of well-being inside the company. So that I think that's a really interesting thing. And also, again, if we're talking about being self-reflective, are you a people department, or are you policy police? And I think that's one of the issues. Sometimes within companies, you see workforces look at messages coming out of HR as policy police. You are there to enforce and regulate the human resource policies of the company. How are you building trust by doing that? And I think that comes back to the company culture again. Do you have the trust? And if you don't, and that again is not necessarily HR's fault, that's the company culture. So how can you push back against the leadership? How can you set those boundaries and go, this is everybody's issue. It's not just HR's.
Absolutely. I think you're very right about being part of the company culture, and that's something that we've touched on in the past with our previous events on culture. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us. It was really wonderful listening to you today. Over
Thank
to
you.
All right, we're a little bit over time, so I just want to make sure that whoever has any questions can stay behind. and ask any of our speakers any questions. Does anybody have any questions for Scott, for Sundrie, for Ivan that they'd like to voice at this point? Scott, you got a few good comments also in the comments section, so I love that as well. And Sundrie, does anybody have questions for Scott or Sundrie, or does anybody want to make any comment? Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I have a question to Scott. Firstly, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey and what you're doing at Mentl, especially in UAE and GCC region. Really, it's a great step what you are doing. So I work for an SME as well as a head of HR in UAE. Have a very supportive leadership who also believes in investing in people's mental health and helping them out and all the occupational hazards, solving them. My question is about, again, we're a corporate service provider. I help out giving HR consultation to our clients. My question is basically in the GCC region, especially UAE, where, like you rightly said, private sector, there's a long way to go. What are the steps we can do to inspire other companies to take that sort of step, or inspire the leadership to actually support the employee well-being?
Keep doing this, which is talking and communicating, and keep communicating. And that's basically what we do all the time. I mean, that's what the awards are there for. That's what we have a podcast, we do events, we do, we've got our own platform, our own knowledge hub, shall we say, that carries stories. We've got podcasts with Lubna on there as well, which is amazing. But yeah, it's continually trying to talk to the community to go, do you know what? This isn't working. We've got social media, you've got LinkedIn. LinkedIn's an incredibly great platform as well to kind of share this stuff. So share what is working, but share what isn't working. And let's just keep being honest about it, because we have to normalize the conversation around mental health, whether that be in the wider community or whether that be in the work community. And we're going to spend a third of our lives in the work community. And there is really no blend these days between work and home life. What happens in one impacts the other and vice versa. Yeah, I think it's just continuing to advocate and continue to work together. I mean, Stories and Mentl have collaborated a number of times because we want to amplify each other's work, because it's both, but I think we're both, our hearts are in the right place and we definitely want to make a difference. So don't see, or create allies, I guess I would say, and keep having this conversation and keep entering the Mentl Awards, of course, he said, with a bit of a promotional plug there at the end. But no, just keep challenging the stigma, because I think ultimately as well, and I know this is a long answer to a short question, eventually the economics of all of this will work its way through, in that people do not want to work for companies that burn out their employees. And the more we keep communicating that, the more that the companies that do the right thing will rise to the top.
Thank you so much
for the answer. Any other burning questions before we close? Any of you who have written in the comments? We're good?
All good.
All right. Well, if we're good, I thank you for your presence. I look forward to seeing you in our next event, March 27th. Please keep sending us feedback. We're happy to adapt and change the topics based on your feedback. And I'm really, really grateful for your presence. And thank you so much to the speakers, Ivan, Sundrie, and Scott. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your presence and your time and your valuable tips. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. I wish you a really nice day, evening.